Alright, so what we're going to show you today is the basic unboxing and assembly of the Sur Ron Light B electric motorcycle. I've got my helper Macy here to help me out with tools and fetching parts. And with that, we'll get going. It's pretty straightforward. Just take some basic tools, which I'll show you as we go. And should be riding in no more than, I would say, 15 to 20 minutes. So here we go. So step one is obviously just getting this main box off. The upper portion is basically on like a lower pallet. So once you cut the straps off, the top more or less lifts off of the bottom, as you'll see here. And with that, a bunch of cardboard packaging that you can discard, which gets us down to the heart of the unit here. Be mindful of the one box that does contain all the hardware and parts, because that does not want to get tossed, of course. Put that aside here. So with that, let me get my knife and finish this real quick. One thing to be careful of while you're doing this, if you use a razor blade like I am to make things quicker, just be careful you don't cut down to the paint or any critical components. So just be extra careful when using a razor blade, just because it's easy to nick the paint on these bikes. It's well packaged, well protected, but the razor blade does make things much easier considering all that is taped and packed. Alright, so once all the plastic is off the bike, as you can see, it basically just needs the handlebars installed with the rest of the controls on one side. The bike itself is supported on the pallet with a lower wooden block, which makes it pretty stable, so you can actually assemble it while it's well supported. In this box in the middle here is the charger, so I recommend you pull that out, and if you'd like, you can actually pull the battery out and get it on the charger while you're assembling the rest of the bike, just to kind of help get that charging sped up there. As you can see here, the battery comes right out of the bike itself, as I have it rooted on this one over here, and plugs right into the charger, which is just a great little charging unit, super high quality, great connectors, and you can monitor the charge level anytime. This one's basically full now. So with that, we'll get going with the handlebar installation. I'm going to pull this charger out and get this battery going while we do that. So grab the key, which comes in that accessories box. There's a keyhole on the side here, which actually unlocks the battery cover itself. Once the battery cover is off, you'll see the main battery, two main connectors, which actually, let me show you these in detail here. Here's your two main connectors. This is your power supply, and this is, of course, your information for the battery. Back inside there, you'll see a small red breaker. Make sure that breaker is to the left, which is the trip position, the open position, off position, before you disconnect these cables. If this stays on, when you disconnect and reconnect this connection here, you're going to see a small arc on the terminal. So it's important that you always open this breaker before you determinate these connections. And these just pop right off. It's super easy. As long as that breaker's off, no issues there. So straightforward. This bike's been sitting in the box a while, so it's got not much of a charge on it, so I'm going to pull this guy out now. As you can see, it's straightforward and simple. It's just pull straight out from the frame here. That's all there is to it. I'm going to go get this plugged in while we finish the rest of the build. Alright, for the handlebar installation, you're going to need basically a 4mm Allen wrench, which is going to be used on these guys here. You're also going to need a 5mm later on, just to tighten up the brake lever. But the 4 is used for these bolts as well as for the other hand grip there. But for now, just take these all the way off, which allows you to put the bar in place. And the reason it's best to take them all off is because these lower bolts here for the headlight actually go into this lower mount here. So you can see that you need to take these screws out to get that in. So we'll do that real quick. Okay, so as you can see, once you get the top two in place, it'll hold the bar in place more or less. Of course, the red buttons and the display should go on the driver's left side when you're sitting on the bike. And for this lower one, essentially just hold this up here, and I'm going to try to avoid routing this cable through the other brake cable. So when you do that, kind of be mindful of where the cables are all sitting. This should go basically between the headset, hold on a second here, and the connector, which you can see it eventually gets sandwiched between the two, which I'm doing right now. Alright, so when you start tightening these up, just be careful that you, well, a couple things. So you want to center the bar. There's a pretty good indicator right in the window here. Until you actually sit in the bike, it's hard to line it up. There is marks inside, some crosshairs to help you kind of get it lined up where it should be. I'm looking at the bike that I already assembled. Let me kind of see where those lines are at. So it looks like I have a pretty good reference mark for the other bike. And really, this is personal preference. Some guys like it to be high, some guys like it low. So whatever works best for you, get things tightened up. Just make sure you tighten it up evenly. That's the key. Top to bottom. If you pinch it funny, it won't be seated right. It won't be tightened properly, and you will have issues, possibly even having this come loose, which is something that you definitely do not want to happen when you're riding. All right, so I've got these tightened up now. One thing that's important to note, do not over tighten these guys. We've seen it done before. If you do, there is a good chance you can strip these holes. And if you do that, you're kind of SOL. So please, you don't have to kill these. Just get them nice and firm. They do have lock washers that are included on them. Get them nice and snug, nice and tight. This lower headlight mount should not move at all once it's on there. So you can see it's pretty solid now. At this point, we're going to start installing the controls for the right hand, which is going to include just the grip and throttle, and of course the brake lever. Alright, so next we're going to slide on the brake lever, which includes two cables. One is the hydraulic cable itself for the brakes, and the second is the electrical cable for the brake cutout. After that, you're going to slide the throttle on, which is going to go over top of the brakes, like so. They connect pretty well together. And for now that they're loose, which is fine, you're going to have to adjust this a bit. What I typically do is, without the tire on the bike, you can't really tell what your position is going to be when you're riding. So I like to snug these up a small amount just to get them snug enough where they're not sliding around. And then you can move them once the bike's assembled, and then tighten them down once you're happy with where it sits. So again, here's the 5mm to snug up the actual brake cable. The brake lever, sorry. Just snug. There we go. And then we'll use the 4 once again to snug up the throttle. Just a little bit. All right. All right, so now that the handlebars are done, we're going to move down to the fork here. So if you look closely at the side, you'll see the symbol says to lock it. It's counterclockwise. So tighten is counterclockwise, which is counterintuitive to most threads you're used to. So using an 8mm, again, Allen wrench, you're going to turn this clockwise, actually, to loosen it, as you can see here. So when you turn that enough, you're going to see this nut come out this side here. We'll set that aside for now. Come across here, and you'll see it's a picture right here says axle release counterclockwise. So that is going to be counterclockwise the way you're used to unthread things. So a little strange, but there's a reason for that, so it doesn't come loose on you. All right, so once you get the threaded portion out, you basically pull it out and manhandle it. So I'm going to put the camera down here so I can do just that. 1 second. All right, this should just pull right out. Again, the bike's not supported too well at this point, so be very careful. There's the axle, just came right out. It's still holding its position because of the fact it's resting on the bottom. Careful, baby, those are greasy.
Oh, but I like them. They're so cool.
I know they're cool. All right, so at this point, you're going to get your wheel ready. What's important here, as you can see, there's a zip tie here, and there's some hardware inside here. Bring it forward so you can see that. It's critical this hardware is utilized. That's the spacer that goes on this side of the wheel. This side here, it's already installed in place. Yours may or may not come that way. It just comes right off if you pull it. But this side, you can see it's loose inside the center here. So I'm going to cut this out. Basically, just install that spacer. It just holds on by hand as you put the wheel in place. Alright, so this part's a bit tricky. What I'm going to do is actually use one of these blocks of cardboard that came with the kit and put the center of the bike up on block, which allows me to have this front wheel suspended. So I'll do that and I'll come back in a second and show you what I did. Alright, so what I did, as you can see, is grabbed a piece of that cardboard that came in the box, put it under the center of the bike, puts the wheel in the air, tons of space to work now, which should make it pretty easy to get this wheel on. So I'll put this camera to the side, and when you put the wheel on, of course, make sure that the disc brake is on the right side. Pull this small spacer out before you start. That just keeps the brake pads spaced for shipment. So pull this out, and then basically as you push the tire on, make sure that your disc brake goes between the pads properly. I mean, once the wheel is in place with the spacers, we're going to feed the axle through the same side that it came out. Okay, so when you grab your wheel again, make sure that you got these spacers properly fitted on each side. They press in with the O-rings and they more or less stay in place. They do fall out if you're not careful. And then, of course, feed the wheel on in the proper direction. Look out, baby. You gotta show the camera. And just make sure that your disc brake goes through between the brake pads real carefully as you're putting this in place, which looks like we are now. But once it's in, you'll feel it. There it is. All right, Macy, can you hand me that big long black piece? There you go. We're going to feed that through this side. Once it goes most of the way through, you're going to have to thread it the rest of the way with the 8mm Allen wrench, which makes things super easy. It goes right through. There we go. Get that nice and snug. And then the small piece, baby. Thank you. Look up, baby. Let the camera see. All right, so now we're going to tighten up this side again with the 8mm. Nice and snug. And then once those are snug, before you tighten too much, just give the wheel a good spin. Make sure that it's spinning freely, which this one is nice and smooth. So now we're going to give this guy a good tightening. See, I already forgot that it's backwards. It's so easy to forget. And you'll feel it kind of click down as you go. You don't have to kill it. You want to make it snug. You don't want to go crazy with it. Just make sure nice and tight. All right, we should be good to go. Spins free. We're in good shape on that side. On to the next step. So you may have wondered this whole time what these orange straps are for. Basically just to limit suspension travel while it's being shipped. They're of not much use beside that. They are kind of cheap, little inexpensive tie downs. If you want to keep them, you can. Otherwise, you can just cut them off. But I will actually just save these because they are actually reusable. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these off. The front and the rear both have this. So we'll pull these off real quick. Okay, so as you can see, once those were released, suspension increased substantially. So it sprung up off of the block I had in there. But now we're essentially done, so we can actually utilize the kickstand. So I'm going to put the kickstand, pull it off the pallet, and now it's going to stand on its own. Alright, so in that small accessory box that I talked about early on, there's basically the manual, some extra zip ties for cable management, and of course the right side foot peg, which is right here. So really you can choose any size or any hole you want here based on your size. I'm going to go with just the middle for now, just because. No real reason aside from it just, I guess it fits the most people. And on the back side is a small nut. It's a 14mm. So make sure you get this guy nice and snug. I'm going to put the camera down and do that right now. And for good measure, I'm going to check the other side. This came pre-assembled, but you never know. Good practice, right? Oh, that's pretty tight. Good job, guys. All right. All right, so at this point, the bike is essentially assembled, minus the adjustments you have to make based on your preference for the handlebars. So sitting the bike, most people have their brakes straight forward. Some like them down, some like them up. Just depends on your preference. Once you get it where you want it, the 5mm Allen head, you just tighten these guys right here on both sides, and ensure the handlebars themselves are snug. And that's going to be it. And it's time to test. All right, so again, the key opens this cover here on the side. Breaker's off. Cable's out of the way. This battery drops right in. There's no real click. I mean, what holds it in essentially is this cover. So once that's in like that, you basically just want to plug in the cable here. Again, there's no arcing because it was properly turned off. Secondary cable. Check out battery, 99%, looking good. When you close this, I found the cover needs a good slam to close and lock in nice and tight. So give it a good hit like that, and now the battery is nice and locked into place. All right, so on the bike now, and put the key ignition, turn it on. Nothing. You know why, right? That switch we turned off to change the battery. Make sure that guy goes back on. That's the main breaker for the bike. We'll close this again. There we go. Now we'll try it again. And we've come to life. Headlight is always on with this bike. Say hi, Macy.
Hi.
So every time your ignition switch is on, headlight's on. That's good for safety. Great lights, nice and bright. Just nice to have it always on. You've got, of course, your standard power, and you got your sport power. Sport power gives you definitely more amps, more torque. For now, we'll just do a quick test ride, and we'll see how it goes. Now, time for the ultimate test. A quick test ride. Tell, baby. Okay, stay back, okay? Just got in low power mode right now, so I'm just going to take it for a quick little cruise. Make sure nothing seems off. Of course, check your brakes before you go hauling ass into the distance. But everything feels great. Bike runs smooth. Let's head back. All right. Back in we go. All right. And that's about all there is. Time to go have some fun.